بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Okay. Yeah, I'm just, if you don't mind at least, I'm perhaps just going to speak a bit about the trip and certain important things that, you'll find useful, inshallah. So I may use maybe most of the time or maybe a little less, whatever, but inshallah, we'll see how it goes. Right. So first thing, the particular conference was in a place called Sirnak. Sirnak is about 1,400 kilometers from Istanbul, going towards the east of Turkey near the Iraqi border. It's about, I think, 15 or 20 minutes or somewhat, or 30 minutes at most from the Iraqi border. Right. So it's that part of Turkey. So that region of Turkey is actually where a lot of Turkish by citizenship, but Kurds live. So even in the street, you hear Turkish, but you'll also hear Kurdish being spoken. Right. So that's the one part of it. So the conference was at a university. There's only one university in the city of Sirnak. It's a fairly small city, 200,000 people or so. Small university with like 4,000 students, all the different faculties, engineering, etc., etc., and the Islamic studies. But the conference was about, I think I mentioned in the past, the Ibn al-Athir brothers and their contribution and anything related to them. So you have the eldest brother, Majduddin, who's the author of Nihaya fi Gharib al-Hadith and many other books. The second brother, Izzuddin Ibn al-Athir, who was Hamas, who wrote Ustul Ghaba about the Sahaba, 5 or 6 volumes, and he wrote a major work in Tariq called Al-Kamil fi Tariq. It's probably second after the second person in history to write on world history and such. In Islamic history, he wrote about everything from the creation of Adam alayhi salam till a few years before he passed away in 633 or something like that. That's when he was 630 when he passed away after Hijrah. Kamil Fit Tariq, that's the second brother. The third brother was Diyauddin. Diyauddin was more into language, poetry, and literature, so he wrote related to those subjects. So conference was anything related to them. In other words, their life, their books, their works, their everything related to them. So there were about 50. There were about 50 presenters over the 3 days or 2.5 days, and speaking about different aspects on them. Many were Turks from different universities across the country, male and female, and there were few Kurds and few came from Iraq, because Iraq is not far, like I said. And because that part of the world, some of it was traditionally in Iraq, this particular person, Ibn al-Athir and his brothers, they were from a place called Al Jazeera, which I'll speak about just now. And then they moved to the city of Mosul with their father, which is in Iraq. And that's where they stayed and where they passed away. And they traveled from there to Baghdad and into Syria, etc. Especially Ibn al-Athir himself, or the second brother, went to Masjid al-Aqsa, went all over. Right, right, so that's where the conference was. Interestingly enough, I met, or amongst those 50, I met, I would think, maybe 20 or 30 of them. I managed to really speak about them. And some of them were specialists in various fields, in hadith, in usul, and history, and seerah, and but all of them, or 90, 80 or percent of them, have written in Turkish. Those few have written in Arabic, those Kurds who were Arabic speaking, and some of the Iraqis who wrote some books and stuff in Arabic, but the rest have written in Turkish. But there's someone who did an entire doctorate on Imam al-Baqillani and his way of thinking in usul and his approach in usul. Someone else did on Adab al-Qadi, someone else, and some were, like I said, male and female. Anyway, so that was just part of the conference, right? And okay, I ended up, because there was only like one decent enough hotel, so and I came a bit late, arrived in the place late, so a number of us, about 20 of us or more, 25 of us, stayed on the campus, like a guest hostel kind of thing, which was actually better. We just walk out to the conference 5 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever. Anyway, that was the one part of the conference. The the city Shirnak actually there's a mountain range that is in that city, huge mountain range which extends from Shirnak right out for 30 kilometers into a place called Jizra or Jazira. The Arabs say Jazira and the Turks say Jizra, right? But it's the same place. Now, what's so significant about the mountain range? That's the mountain range called Al Judi. We hear about it in the Quran, وَاسْتَوَتْ عَلَى الْجُودِ, where Nuh alayhi salam's ark stopped. Right, so this is the mountain range. Judi mountain range is huge, very high mountain range, or known as Judi. Right, on the top of the one part of the Judi is the markings, or so we would say the, what was it? The impression made by the ark when it stopped. Right, so there's a small spot where they verified it historically. There are books written on it. I have some books they gave me, but okay, some of it's written in Turkish, where they've proven that that is indeed the place where the ark stopped. So that's the one thing. Secondly, on the ark with Nuh alayhi salam, there were about 80 people. And though when those 80 people disembarked or got off the ark, they lived in an area nearby. And that area was known as Qaryat al-Thamanin, the village of 80, because of the 80 people. And it's known like that till today, although the name is changed from an Arabic name to more Kurdish, but it's still known as Qaryat al-Thamanin, although in Kurdish. Only a few people live in that area now, but nonetheless, so that's second important thing about Judy and the Ark and the people. Now, 30 kilometers away is a huge city. The Sirnak is small, 200,000. 30 kilometers away is this huge city I spoke about, Jazeera or Jazra. Uh, Jazeera is along the banks, part of it is along the banks of the Dijla, the Tigris River. We hear about the Tigris all the time. It separates almost Iraq on the other side, and as it flows part one area, and you see Syria on the other side. It's a huge historical city, amazing history, big city, very busy. Right, like I said, in all these areas are in mountain ranges, like it's in a valley, mountains on all sides, and then even the Shirnak is all mountains on the side. You think, where are you going to find people living here? What is a city with a university and stuff? Anyway, Jazeera or Jizra is a very ancient city. Why? Nuh alayhi salam lived when they got off the Safinat Nuh on the ark. They lived in that area. So that area, as long as the river provided a water source and the mountain range. So in Jazeera or Jazra, there's a masjid in the city. It's called Masjid Nuh alayhi salam, and Nuh's qabr is there. The qabr of Nuh alayhi salam is at in that courtyard of that masjid. Right, so that's another important thing about this particular area. Then, when we read later on of history, we come across a person by the name of Ismail Abu al-Izz al-Jazari. He was known as the father of modern day engineering. He sort of designed what we could almost the closest to what we know today as your various engineering and algorithms, and the father of all these computers and stuff like that. Although he done it 600 years ago, but he laid down the foundation. He was from the city of Al Jazeera. His grave is there, and in one of the masjids in the courtyard, the same masjid where Nuh alayhi salam is buried, but he's on one other corner of the masjid, and his home where he worked and all the instruments that he used to design all of his stuff was actually there, maybe about 2 kilometers away or something. Right, so that's another important thing about the city. There's a lot of other history near the river banks where the Umayyads were, and there's a masjid which has a minaret, which I already walked in and I said, this is unusual. This is not an Ottoman minaret. Ottomans don't build like things like this. Never built minarets like this. So they told me, yes, this minaret was built during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So this masjid is standing well over 1,400 years, at least the minaret. Inside, there's a portion which is still old, but they've renovated and improved part of it. So the minaret is still standing as is. Um, right, so that's another important thing. Very interesting, the city of Jazeera, just next to it is a small little village, very small village. That's where Sheikh Saeed Ramadan al-Bouti is actually from. Right? And in Jazeera, he still has uncles and aunts who live in the city, who live in Jazeera. I remember Sheikh al-Bouti was Kurdish, and his father, Mullah Ramadan al-Bouti, moved to Syria. So he still has relatives who, and there are many Syrian families like that, who have relatives in this part of the city, who are Kurds, especially those who live in Halab, in Aleppo. That's why in the streets of Aleppo, sometimes you'll still hear, occasionally, some Kurdish. So because the Kurds moved and settled across, so Sheikh al-Bouti still has family who, who reside in Jazeera. So that is the one part of just related. So that's that. Now, um, then I had always heard about certain ulama, Kurdish ulama who were great Shafi'i scholars, and I had a few names in my mind, or written down. Someone had informed me about Sheikh Badruddin, or they generally the Kurds call him Mullah Ramadan, Mullah Burhanuddin, Mullah Badruddin At-Tilwi, and there's two by the names of Badruddin. So I asked someone around there about these people and where they are. They said they're in the city of Sirt. In Arabic, it's called Isart. Uh, and they were known as like great scholars, and that area produced some of the great scholars in the last few hundred years, over 700 years. There's always been great scholars. Some of the ulama from Sham and Iraq said that area had a lot of awliya. Anyway, I made inquiries and they said Isart or Sirt in the Turkish, it's normally spelled Sirt. It's a huge city, sort of hidden in between a huge mountain range. And from Sirnak to Sirt is like 100 kilometers, but everything, the entire distance is through the mountains. You driving a few hundred meters above, and the mountain the roads are quite narrow. First, say 20 or 30 kilometers is really bad, and after that it improves a bit, but you're still in the mountains. So I managed to get hold of one youngster who studied at one of the, we'd say in inverted commas, or we may call a small madrasa or Darul Ulum from Shirnak. He said he's never heard about these ulama, but he had never visited that city in his life, although he's in his late 20s. But, and he's never visited there, he has never met these ulama. So I told him, do you want to go? Let's go. He brought his grandfather along with, who loved the ulama, very pious man, reads a lot of Quran in his late 70s. So he said they want to accompany us. So we managed to hire or get like a taxi driver and set out to go to Sirt and to meet these ulama. The first person we had to meet was in Sirt, was Friday morning. Yeah, it's about 11 o'clock or something. It was Mullah Badruddin Darwish al-Tilwi. Mullah Badruddin is one of the great awliya. Everybody knows about him. He's 102 years old at the moment. He's very, very ill, very sickly. So they don't allow visitors generally, but they allowed us in for a few minutes to speak to him. But you don't shake his hand because they worried about germs and infection and stuff like. And he wears a mask just to. But he's old man, very, very pious. He's written some amazing works. One of his best and most popular works is a book called Abda'ul Bayan fi Tafsir Ayat al-Quran, a tafsir of the Quran. And he wrote another tafsir, which is like a condensed version of the first, and some other books as well. He runs a madrasa, which I'll speak about in a short while. He doesn't teach too much now, or he doesn't teach really, but he's got other people who teach. in his institution in Sirt. Right? So that was Mullah Badruddin. We made Juma just down the road from where he is. And after Juma, we managed to get a car to take us to Tilu, the town of Tilu or village of Tilu, which is about 6 kilometers away. So it's actually part of Sirt, but it's a small little village on the outskirts. But in terms of its, jurisdiction, it falls under the municipality, I think, of Sirt. So Tilu is also known historically to have produced some great ulama and awliya. Two people we needed to meet there. One was Mullah Burhanuddin at Tilwi at his madrasa, which is known as Al Madrasa Al Mujahidiyya. He's in his 90s or so. This man has been teaching for the last 60 years continuously, unless he's traveled for maybe Umrah or Hajj or something. But otherwise, he teaches every day from an hour before Fajr till about 9 at night, every day, Monday to Sunday. Right? The last maybe 30 years or something like that, or 20 years, he sleeps in the madrasa. And he only goes once in 2 weeks home to see his children or grandchildren. His children all grew up with him in the madrasa. The males are all ulama. So he goes and sees granddaughters or something, but once in 2 weeks. He's got a room there where he's not teaching, he's sitting in khalwa and just making ibadah. Closed room, carpet, some books around him, and his musalla and a pillow or something like that, and on the floor, and that's it. That's where I met him in that room. Right? And he tells you, listen, I only got 5 minutes. After that, I have to be teaching or I have to be making ibadah. Right? So that was Mullah Burhanuddin at Tilwi. And you walk down the road, maybe about 8 or 10 minute walk from him. There's another madrasa called Madrasa Al Mamduhiyya, and that's where we met another Mullah Badruddin, younger than the first one. The first one is 102. This one is probably about maybe 75, 80, I think. He runs a madrasa there as well. And we managed to speak to him and, get some information about from him as well. The amazing thing about these people is I never thought we still have things like this. We often speak about different madrasas and different ulama across the world. And we speak about the Darul Ulooms, and they have an intense 6 year program. And maybe in Tarim, they have a program which is intense, or in Mauritania and stuff like that. These people are not shy. They tell you we don't let any student leave us in under 10 years. They must stay with us for 10 years. The program is 10 years or more of study, intense study. They ask me, for example, what do your institutions teach in Nahu and Sarf? You tell them, say, Ajrumiya, and you tell them Sharh of Ibn Aqil, maybe, of Ala Alfiya, and maybe one or two small little books that, that the students generally use here in South Africa. They tell you that's a waste of time. Straight. They are not shy. And that's not Nahu and Sarf. That's for beginners. They teach as part of their syllabus compulsory close to 12 works in Nahu and Sarf, taking you right up to the most senior after Mughni al-Labib and all of these other works. They teach 12 major works in Nahu and Sarf. They they say these are ilmul ala. What's the point if students don't know enough Nahu and Sarf and the tools? How are they going to understand the text? And they use the example. They said tafsir of Baydawi is very complicated. You need to know language on a very high level to really appreciate it and appreciate the Quran and etc. They teach mantiq, not Isa Ghuji only. They teach close to 8 or 9 works in mantiq and philosophy. Classical works which are very difficult. I thought nobody in the world teaches it. They still teach stuff which uh, today many seniors don't even understand. They teach ilmul munadara, the art of debate as is written in the classical works, the science of argumentation and debate. They specialist Shafi, so they teach They tell you, ask me what you teach in Shafi fiqh. They say, I told him that some madrasas teach Matan Abi Shuja, Awdah al Masalik, and one or two other works. He said, what happened to Mughni al Muhtaj? And Nihaya, what's it? Nihaya, what was it? It's not Nihaya. Rawdatul Talibin, and thus they teach all of it. They teach all of these Shafi books up to the highest level. They teach Imam Ghazali's works. They teach Aqidah extensively, Sharh and Jawhara, and thus, and a whole lot of other works. They teach works in Usul, starting from, and then in Madrasa al Mujahidiyah, the Shaykh Quranuddin's son, his name is Alauddin. He said to me, we make our students memorize, um, what was it, the book in Tasawwuf, Al-Hikam by Ibn Ata'illah. They must memorize the whole poem, Al-Hikam by Ibn Ata'illah. So I said to him, but that's tough. He says, yes, students must memorize it, but we reward those students. So I said, what do you mean you reward your students? Yeah, he said, every student that memorized Al-Hikam after Quran and after all, they memorize the Hikam, we give him $150. And those that were mastered it, like the way they knew Quran or something, we gave them in addition to that a piece of gold. Give them a piece of gold for memorizing the Hikam by Ibn Ata'illah. Right? So that was, I never heard of something like that before, but amazing. And if you enter the madrasa, it's a house. In the suburb, a house. Or the whole houses next to it, in front of it, there's a masjid, etc. So you'd never say the madrasa. And the traditional Arab kind of houses which are built with these huge walls and 2, 3 story house. But you enter and there's like 50 doors on every floor. One door opens up into a kitchen, this door opens up into a classroom, this door opens up into a khalwa, this go a second floor, there's another door or 50 different doors, each opening up to classroom here, the Sheikh's khalwa, this room does this room is for ibadah, this. So they don't leave that building. Everything happens in this one house. Students stay, work, study, do everything within this. All of them were the same system. Mullah Badruddin, the one was 102, the one Burhanuddin, all of them same system. The traditional Kurdish Shafi'i ulama, they teach in Kurdish and Arabic. And a little Turkish, but generally they teach in Kurdish and Turkish, in Arabic rather. Yeah, so this is a very intense program, and they said to me, so nobody leaves here before 10 years, right? Because what can you teach? They say, how much can you learn in 4 and 5 years? So it was interesting to find that there's still people who maintain that system, a very, very intense kind of system with a great level of adab and akhlaq and ibadah and stuff, all of it combined in their approach to teaching and stuff like that. They're very particular on certain things, yes. In terms of how students conduct themselves and things like that. But this is an entire, right in a valley. Like I said, no, I would never think that still today, 1,400 kilometers from Istanbul, in the middle of a valley where you see nothing around it, you find a huge city. And in the city, then these madrasas that are running still today. Yeah. And then they mentioned, for example, what Hikam by Ibn Ata'illah, there's a lovely commentary to it by someone known as Ibn Abbad. Ibn Abbad was from the city of Fez in Morocco, but he wrote this commentary, I think 500 years ago, 600 years ago. They consider it to be one of the best commentaries on Al-Hikam, and they teach it. They teach this particular commentary to Al-Hikam by Ibn Ata'illah. So they've even published it and I believe republished it, etc. Yeah, so that's a bit on this region. Then not far from there is actually the other areas of Diyar Bakr. Okay, Diyar Bakr is about in the opposite direction, about 230 kilometers from Sirnak. Diyar Bakr has got a lot of ulama, and also Diyar Bakr is the area where Islam entered Turkey from that part of the country, and there's graves of about 30 or somewhat Sahaba, including Khalid ibn Walid's son Sulaiman. I never got to Diyarbakir because if the 100 kilometers took me like 2 hours to go in the opposite direction, would have been, and 230 kilometers would have been a problem, right? And getting someone to drive and car and stuff like that, and there was no time for that. I was only gone out for 3 days or so. But hopefully in the near future we can get to Diyarbakir where there are more ulama and stuff like that. But it was good enough in the sense to meet men who, the people in the city and in the area, Sirnak and everywhere, ulama generally know of Mullah Badruddin, the one who's 102, as one of the great awliya and salihin and in the area. I was at least we were able to meet him and the other two in the city of Tilu. All right, so I think that covers almost everything. I think unless anybody wants to add or ask anything, you can feel free to do so. Yeah, if I forgot something, then I can always explain it if you have any questions or comments. Nothing.
Sheikh, was the institute only for males or females as well?
The one institution I think had females, but you don't see them. The others I think had majority or the only males. That maybe the females come at a different time. Those the Kurdish Shafi ulama are very strict and very particular on that aspect of the mixing of male and females and the way the females dress, etc. So you won't see a female even if they are there, right? So that is but I think the one institution, the last one, Madrasa al Mamduhiya, I think there are females because I could hear in the background the voices and stuff, and I think I saw some leaving and someone being dropped off by a car, and they were entering from like a different door from the ones we entered. So yeah, I don't know how the approach and how do they teach and stuff like that. I'm not sure because some of these shuyukh also were taught by their mothers at some point when they were very young and stuff like that. Their mothers, the Sheikh Mullah Badruddin's mother was known to be very, very pious woman and, a lot of ibadah and stuff like that as well. Generally, I think what I read already, a small little book where Mullah Badruddin has advice to his children. Because 30 years ago, when he was about 70, he thought it's time for him to pass away. So he wrote wasiya, advices for his children, and he named them. This is advice for my son Jamaluddin. This is advice for my son so and so. This is for my daughters. And it's 30 years later, he's still alive. So those advices, and even says what should be done with my wealth, what should be done with my books, what should be, like a full, almost wasiya and like a will and whatever. But now he's 102, he's still alive. So that those advices have been published and printed because some valuable advice. So he gave me a copy of that. So I've been reading that. And so in there he speaks about what extent should you educate the females and how much and this and that. So from his advice you can gauge that maybe they didn't take females up to the 10-year course. They maybe taught the females much less, maybe 3 or 4 years, and they concentrated on the more on the males as such because he believed in his through reading his advice that is that the males are the one who are outside and the females should be inside, and hence the males should be the ones who will be very highly educated in terms of the Sharia and all of that, and they should then educate their household. That's I read two or three of the advices that he had given. Each one is in a poem about 15 lines, 10-line poem, where he's giving his children advice. So I managed to read two, I think, or three, and the last portion of it. Anything else? I have maybe a picture of one of them. The others, the one who's 102, he said no, he's not well, and he's had a mask on, and said so there was no photo of him. The other one I managed to get a photo of Mullah Badruddin and Mullah Burhanuddin. There are a few photos of him on the internet as well, but I'll try and share that with you, inshallah.
Sheikh, where do the students end up?
The students end up doing different things. Some end up doing business, some end up doing serving as imam, some end up teaching at the very same institution, and some set up their own small institutions. I met someone at the conference. His name was Dr. Zafar. I can't remember his surname. He's a professor or lecturer at one of the universities near Diyarbakir. So he spoke Arabic very well. So I was speaking to him quite a lot, and he knew a lot about South Africa. So I was speaking to him, and then he said, I asked him, where have you studied your initial studies? So he said, I studied in Mullah Burhanuddin's madrasa for 10 years. So he's a graduate from Mullah Burhanuddin's madrasa. He's now a professor or something at a university. He went after that to do his master's degree and PhD, whatever. But so he's so that's just one. And he was the one who actually, why I spoke to him a lot, because he's Kurdish, who's got a lot of roots in Iraq as well, or family. And he told me that, introduced me to one is himself and another person who was with him, who teaches with him at the same university. One is from the very same town that Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi comes from, or the same family that Abu Bakr Effendi, who came to Cape Town, is from. And then the other was from the area where the Quran is actually from. Ibrahim al-Qurani and Abu Tahir al-Qurani were the teachers of Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar, rather Abu Tahir, and Shah Waliullah Dahlawi were students of the Quranis who were in Medina. The Quranis are originally Kurds from that part of Iraq near Irbil, and this person was able to introduce me to people from that area. So yeah, and then that's how I got to know him. And he said he's a graduate from Mullah Burhanuddin's madrasa. Spent 10 years there. So yeah, it depends. Uh, they do different kinds of things and stuff. Some end up teaching, some end up doing business, some end up going the other way, and joining a university, because in terms of ilm and knowledge, yes, the standard is exceptionally high. And then they get the formal certificate as such from a university, and then they continue teaching. Um, yeah, they don't have like thousands of students. They have maybe 100 students or so. But over the years that they've been running for 30, 40 years, they have produced uh, probably thousands of students.
Okay, Sheikh, repeat what you said about Shah Waliullah. I didn't get that.
Shah Waliullah, when he traveled to Medina, he studied under Abu, Abu Tahir al-Qurani. And Sheikh Yusuf from Makassar traveled to Medina, and he also studied under the Qurani. You have the father and the son. So the link that we as South Africans have to the Quranis go two ways. Go via Shah Waliullah as a student of the Quranis, and Sheikh Yusuf Makassar, who was also a student of the Quranis. Anyway, I think our time is about to end. Any case, anyone want to add one or two last things? You may have a minute or so. If not, then we'll meet again on Thursday, inshallah. I have some of their books. I mean, the Mullah, the 102, Badruddin gave me a copy of his tafsir. The other one gave me a copy of the Sharh, the commentary to Al-Hikam. He gave me both the tafsir, the longer version and the slightly abridged version. And then the commentary to Al-Hikam, etc. So some interesting works that can look through. And I have some books, like I said, on Nuh alayhi salam and the whole story about the ark and the cover and all of that, the history, like 1,000-page book written with about almost 50 articles in the book written by different people on different aspects related to Nuh alayhi salam. but maybe, maybe,
Sheikh, you've been to pretty
mm,
much most of the countries. Is this the highest level of education Sheikh has experienced?
difficult to say. Like I know Sheikh Hassan Didu had a very high level in his institution in Mauritania, which is also a 12-year course or 10-year course. Initially 12 and then brought down to 10. So I don't know, but in terms of like a high level of combination between knowledge and, spirituality and ibadah and tasawwuf and all of it and all in one, then these guys who are very, very high, they would be way up there, would can match almost anyone. I think very few are on this level till now. And others they had this level maybe, and then lowered the standard slightly. They saying students are no longer interested. No, no, these they don't care about whether students are interested or not. He just tell you this is our manage. This is what we follow. Whether we have 20 students or whether 50 students, we continue the same way. We don't adjust in terms of dropping the standards. We may add certain things, but we're not going to reduce and take out unnecessarily. If, for example, a book on Munadara, there's a better book on it, yes, then we'll replace it. But generally, we're going to maintain that they need to go through 8 or 10 works on the subject and they need to do this. The son, who I spoke to, Mullah Burhanuddin's son, who's a graduate from the same institution, he's now the director of it because his father is 90 and just spends his time teaching. So he sat with me for a long time, over an hour, explaining the entire syllabus and how they work and the approach and everything in detail. So even at the 102-year-old chef, he's, we'd say, right hand man. His name was Mullah Muhammad Bakir, was busy editing some works in Aqidah on his computer in his office while we entered. He's editing some works will be published in Aqidah and works in Tasawwuf and Fiqh. He was busy with manuscripts and stuff. So he gave me a long rundown on their course and how they teach and why and what and all of it. So yeah, it should definitely be amongst the institutions or the areas which have a very high standard.